Please welcome Senior Product Marketing Manager at Slack, Michael Chen.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I'm so excited that you're here at the Afternoon Opportunity Breakout session. And it's actually super encouraging for me to see all of you here because that means that you're interested in learning about apps in Slack. So hopefully I can deliver for you today. My name is Michael Chen, and I'm a product marketer on the Workflow Builder team here at Slack. So today's a pretty exciting day for our team, since you just saw what that product looks like. Later today, I'll be joined by two of our valued customers, Kirk Pedersen from IBM, as well as Mike Solomon from Hearst magazine, to share some of their stories on how they use Slack and apps at their companies. We've got a packed agenda for you today. First, I'll get up and let's talk about our love-hate relationships with all the tools, apps, and data that we share at our organizations. Next, Kirk will come up and share with us, and we can learn about how one of the world's largest companies uses, builds, and manages apps. And lastly, Mike will come up and share with us one of these fascinating apps that Hearst has built that allows every user at their company, from technical to non-technical, to access a data warehouse of information and metrics to make decisions simply by using natural language. Now, to get this started, I would love for you to just imagine lunchtime at your organization. Not the sandwiches that you just ate, but think about what happens around noon at your company. Everyone gets up, and they probably want to find their favorite restaurants to satisfy their cravings. But if you live in San Francisco or another major city, you know that salads cost around $18. So you're not looking for any salad. You're looking for the best salad that you can find. So what happens is that these people get up, leave their companies and offices, walk around, get stuck in traffic, wait in line, check their phones, and then an hour or so later, they get back to their offices, only sometimes satisfied. That's me every once in a while. Now, this is actually not that different from how our organizations use our data and tools. You can imagine that your workforce tries to access the right information at that time of need. And often, they're looking for the best available. But this same kind of thing happens. They try to log in, and they can't because they forgot a password. Or someone's on PTO, and they can't get access to the information that they're looking for. So it's extremely frustrating. A lot of time is wasted. A lot of context switching happens. And it's especially frustrating for you IT decision makers and admins in the audience because you spent so much time curating these tools to find the best ones for your organization to use. Let's make this a little bit more real. This is my inbox at some point in time, and many of you also have this, where you've been commented into a document, and everyone just wants your eyes and attention or your opinion on some document. Now, I've sifted through these things and decided to actually open one of these things up, just to find I don't have access to this document because no one gave me permissions. So I hit the request access button. Hours pass. Days pass. Frontiers passes, and I actually don't have any slides left because no one helped me on the rest of this slide presentation. Laughing at my own jokes, it's always a good thing. So a lot of time passes, and you finally decide to open up an email and try to email that document owner to get access. A little bit more time passes, and you finally get into this document. Just to realize a week later, all of this stuff has happened. You don't know the context of what's been happening in that document, and you're super confused, and your mind is blown. How many of you have experienced this at your company in collaboration before? I see most of your hands go up. Now, the thing is, this is just one example, and we've heard several times throughout today that the average enterprise actually uses over 1,000 of these cloud services. And that's a lot of these tools to be stuck between. Of course, you're thinking, my teams probably don't use 1,000 tools. They only use a couple on a daily basis. But I think your team actually uses a lot more than you think. So let's take an engineering team, for example. Each day, they're most likely in the developer tools that they're used to using, GitHub, Jira, as you would have it. But every once in a while, they'll participate in cross-functional work. So imagine that this engineering team is pulled into a hiring panel, and they need to access Greenhouse to see some candidate information. Or they're helping a customer fix a bug, so they need to go into Salesforce and access that customer information. Now, the problem is, if they're not used to using these tools, it's actually very hard for them to look for, navigate, and figure out how to use these very complex systems, which is pretty unfortunate because they're really just looking for that surface level information. And when taken holistically, your engineering team, who you thought was only using a couple of those apps, is actually using a lot more than you think. And that's also a lot of web browsers to be sifting between. So we also know from research that about 30% of a worker's time is spent going between these tools. That's a lot of time. But we also know that the solution is not to squash the number of tools that you use, because organizations are evolving and they're going from a one vendor vertical to picking the best in class software to help meet their needs, just like those salads that I'm looking for. So, what should you do? We can look at pictures of puppies and high-five them all day long and de-stress. But I know that you're at this session today because you recognize that this problem is something that you deal with at your company, and you're also looking for some of these best practices of how we can use and bring these tools and apps into Slack to help you organize yourself and your workforce. So let's begin. We all know that Slack is a good place for collaboration to happen. We chat in piano channels and direct messages. Now, many of you are also familiar that the Slack platform allows you to bring all of these data and tools into the place that communication is already happening, so that people don't have to bounce back and forth between different applications. This provides a lot of efficiency gains and really helps you get more out of your existing tech stack investments. But what do we call these things? We've heard them called apps, bots, integrations, plugins, add-ons, extensions, connectors. Oh my. We also know that through research, all of these terms are very, very confusing for our customers. So I would like to simplify for all of you. At Slack, there are 3 types of apps that serve very different use cases for the people in your organization. They range from simple off-the-shelf ones that you can just install from the app directory, all the way out to customized powerful systems that are built by your teams for your teams. Now, external apps are ones like Salesforce, Twitter, Google Drive, ones that you download for a very specific purpose, and they're built by our partners. Many of you are here, so we thank you for that. Moving down a little bit toward the middle, sometimes you need something a little bit more customized, and you just saw in the keynote that we are about to release Workflow Builder, which is a way, it's a tool for those people who do not know how to code or know how to code, so for anyone to use, to build workflow apps that help you automate some manual tasks and processes. And lastly, at the very end, they're custom apps. These are apps that can range from very simple notifications all the way out to extremely powerful systems that meet the direct needs of some team or service and workflow that you have at your company. I was going to leave you a couple of cards in the bottom of your chairs to give you examples of what these are, but it's really hard to turn around an entire room this big, so I would encourage all of you to go to the platform station out in the expo hall, and you'll get some of these cards in that, on that wall to get some ideas and inspirations of how to get started. So let's talk about each of these three types of apps to begin. Now, first, external apps. Slack's platform is intended to enhance third-party solutions and to not replace them. So we want to provide easy ways for you to share information and do the quick contextual work and reduce all of those bottlenecks that we just talked about in the beginning. Now, if you imagine an iceberg, you know that about 20% of an iceberg is above water. And that's kind of the work that we're aiming to address with apps in Slack. They're the simple things like tracking the progress of a ticket in Jira or looking at customer profile information in Salesforce. The other 80% that's underwater, that deep work, like editing a document, should all still happen in the enterprise software solutions. Now, remember that document collaboration example from earlier? This is what that mess would look like if I had installed an app to help me out in Slack. So when I'm sharing a file with Google Drive, immediately Slack knows to notify me that not everyone has permissions to access this document. So I can click. It'll ask me what kind of permissions they should have, and boom, no more waiting. And I actually have a slide deck to present. For the people receiving the file, it's really easy to preview. So if I have the Office 365 app installed and I upload a PowerPoint, you can actually see a rich preview of that document without having to download that file at all. And here's one of my favorites. When you're collaborating, you can decide to work in whichever environment you're currently in at that moment. So if you're working in Google Slides, you can write a comment right there, and it shows up in Slack as a direct message. Replying to that direct message sends that comment right back into the Google slide, and so forth. So you can stay productive wherever it is that you're working. And if you found that to be a very useful, cool example, you've also heard this number, 1,500 plus apps in the app directory that you can start and install to really begin seeing these efficiency gains at your organization. You can find these in our app directory at slack.com/apps, or check out that platform wall with a couple of more examples. You're probably also thinking, 1,500 is a lot of apps, and it's a huge number, so where do I get started? And I'm willing to bet that most of you use something to address the work in each of these categories. So we would encourage you to go take a look at the tools that you already use and install that app so you can see what kind of benefits you can get from that. Now, while we have a whole bunch of useful, ready-to-use apps, sometimes you just need something a little bit more customized to that team's need. And this is where Workflow Builder comes in. So Workflow Builder allows anyone from HR, marketing, sales, engineering, execs, interns, to build apps that they can use on Slack. Workflow Builder exists without having to install any new software, and you can build a series of apps using templatized visual ways, very similar to what Squarespace or Weebly did for web page development. And this type of app, the output, which we call workflow apps, sits somewhere in between external apps and custom apps in terms of ease to use, as well as the difficulty it is to produce. And there's a lot of use cases for this. You just saw one for onboarding in the product keynote, and here's just a list of a couple of more. With a little more time right now, I'd actually like to build a few more apps for you to see how easy it is for us to use Workflow Builder. All right, so we know that workflows can be something from very simple, such as welcoming someone to an office, all the way out to very complex purchase approval processes. So if we switch, oh, we're already there. Okay, so let's imagine that a simple process or workflow is you coming to Frontiers and trying to figure out what the Wi-Fi password is. I know it's on the back of your badge, but imagine that it's an office or you don't actually have access to this really quickly. What you would normally do is turn to your colleague to your left or right, ask them what the Wi-Fi password is. They don't know, so they have to go track down a volunteer who then tries to figure out what the Wi-Fi. A lot of time passes, and you still don't have a Wi-Fi password. Now, let me show you how quickly it is to build an app that can dictate this type of very common information so that you don't have to remember these things in the office. So what I'll do is click Create and decide what the person who wants the Wi-Fi password needs to do to bring it up. And for this, because I want it on cue, I'm going to click /command and just write Frontiers Wi-Fi password. So this is the trigger. This is what will have to happen in order for the Wi-Fi password to come up. And the next thing I want to do is what follows after. So I'll add a step. And very simply, I'll send a message to the person who entered the command and say, welcome to Slack. I guess it's Frontiers. The Wi-Fi password is, I actually don't know the Wi-Fi, Slack 2019. Save. And that's it. And you see a workflow here. When someone types that /command in, this message will follow. So let me show you what it looks like. I'll publish this to an app that I created earlier, which is Frontiers Info. Hit publish. Confetti, which means something good happened. And open it up in Slack. So first I'll get a notification that I, as the creator of this app, have now just installed this app in Slack. I'll go to a channel, type this /command Frontiers Wi-Fi, and boom. That password's right there. And anyone at your organization can use an app like this. Now that's a simple one. Let me show you one that's a little bit more complex. So you're working in your Slack channels, and a lot of good ideas will flow back and forth. Johan here thinks it'd be a great idea to send a box of socks to his customers. And what usually needs to happen here is Johan needs to take this request to accounting or a team to get budget approval. And he has to track down that team. He has to give context around that request. He has to figure out how much money it costs. And all of this takes a lot of churn and barriers to accomplish. Instead, what the accounting team could do is create an app that helps expedite this process. So back in Workflow Builder, create a new app. I will go and create. And this time I'll select a trigger that's message actions. So you all know that you can you can port messages to additional tools and actions. So what I'll do is hit that. I will write budget approval as the app name. Get your ideas approved. Money. Save. So this is what triggers that workflow from happening. The accounting team probably also wants to collect some of that additional information, like how much money he needs. So I'll add a step and add an option to collect form responses. And this is just a very simple questionnaire. So how much money do you need? A short answer is good for this. And I'll ask one more question, which is this actually critical to your mission? And I want them to select it from a list. So I'll go to select from list and type in 2 options they can choose from. Not really. I will send it to the channel that this original message was sent to so that they can follow on in context. Type a quick note where I can customize some of these dynamic pieces of information that have showed up earlier in the workflow, such as who clicked the button, the response to the question of, well, I guess I need to publish this first. Live demos, y'all. But I can also link to that, to the text from the message that's been happening in channel so that there's a little bit more context. So click here for form. Let me just make sure that this, well, great. And then lastly, I want to be able to send this information back to the accounting team right to the channel that the accounting team is doing their work in. So I'll send it to the accounting marketing group. It's because I pasted it in the wrong place. So the person who clicked the action, the response to how much money they need, is it critical? And there you go. The details and context right there. Let me just edit this real quick. This should say, thanks for your idea. Please fill out some more info. All right. Whew, that was fun. Okay, so that took about 2 minutes for me to build, but this will actually save you a lot of time in your team. So what I'm going to do is publish this to my budget approval app, get some more confetti, and open in Slack. Okay, so let's go back to that accounts channel. Johan here wants some socks, real bad. We're going to go here and click message action. There it is. And the budget approval app is right there. And there you go. Thanks for your idea. Please give us some more information. So I click here to fill out the form. I need a lot of money. And of course, this is important. And I hit submit. Well, that's all Johan needs to do. And what you just saw here is that the accounting department just got a notification that, well, I guess I'm Jennifer Hines in this case. So Jennifer needs a lot of money. It's very important. And here's the context of all of that information that Jennifer and Johan have been talking about in channel. If they need to have a follow-up discussion, they can open up a thread and talk to Johan right away so that all of this information is organized in one place and you don't have to flip back and forth or hunt down the teams that you need to accomplish that workflow. So wasn't that pretty cool? All right. What you just saw there is an entire workflow that would have taken hours, if not days, to accomplish, several teams to hunt down, but we just built that app in about 2.5 minutes, and we've saved a ton of time. But it doesn't end there. You've also heard a ton about our developers who've helped us build over 450,000 custom apps. And instead of me standing here on stage telling you about the types of custom apps that you can build, I'd like to invite up some of our customers to tell their stories. So first, I'd love to invite up Kirk Pedersen from IBM. Kirk.
Hey, Michael.
So
Thanks
good
for
to see
having
you.
me.
Welcome. Let's take a seat here. All right. So most of you know about IBM, but Kirk shared with me a couple of numbers that are mind-blowing. So over 380,000 employees in 170 plus countries. Is that right?
That's correct.
That's
so IBM's named Big Blue for a reason. We're one of the largest IT service companies within the world. We also have one of the largest innovative engineering set of technology experts in the world as well.
That's great. Kirk, you have a very important role. You are an IT leader at IBM. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that means?
Sure. So I'm part of the CIO's office. Within the CIO's office, we interface with every business unit within IBM. And part of our mission is to make sure the company as a whole is productive as possible so we can deliver, the employees can work on a day-to-day basis in support of our clients. It's certainly not an easy task, but certainly one that's very exciting and very productive.
That's great. Here's actually a couple more numbers that you shared with me. 165,000 active users, over 10,000 workspaces. How do you manage all of that? And 3,000 apps. That's a lot of work to be doing, right?
For sure. Yep. IBM's implementation is one of the largest, certainly within the world for Slack. Slack started a couple of years ago as a developer up movement, trying to change the culture from IBM, and it's continued to grow within the company as a whole. The focus was around shifting culture through best practice and best-in-class tools, and in doing so, Slack is beyond a collaboration app. It's more of a portfolio collaboration app where teams can build into it their product portfolio and processes.
That's perfect. I like to hone in on this number, 3,000 apps, because that's what we're talking about here. That's a lot of moving parts. So can you talk to us about how IBM manages all of that and all the security that you have to consider?
Sure. So our employees themselves are highly innovative. The mission of Slack, what we attempted to do with Slack a couple years ago, was drive self-organization. As a part of that, our employees identify how best to use Slack to meet their day-to-day business. And part of that is apps. One of the larger challenges within IT these days is around app integrations. It's great to have a single app, but really the value is how do we tie multiple apps together, and how do we do that in a secure fashion that's especially appropriate for the enterprise business. In this case, we have a number of org grid admins that manage our Slack enterprise grid instance. We also have over 10,000 workspaces, and we rely upon those workspace admins to interface with our corporate information security office, their business information security office, to identify which applications we think are appropriate for their workspace. Things we focus on are around source owner. Where is the source of the application? Where is the data? Is it appropriate for the workspace itself? Is this a regulated workspace? Things that make sure that IBM as a whole is secure and safe, but still allowing innovation for the company.
That's perfect. And you've also talked to me a bit about Powerup programs. So can you actually tell us a bit more about how IBM connects multiple apps together to build this Powerup program?
Sure. So a couple years ago, we came up with this idea of Powerup. We noticed within the IT industry that it's great to build a single application, but it's better when you tie multiple applications together to deliver something bigger and better, a bit bigger business value. We call this a Powerup. So we actually started about a year and a half ago or so with the core Slack development team that originally bring Slack into IBM and focus those developers into an area around automation and orchestration. How do we tie multiple applications together, build around that, orchestrate, automate, and fix a business problem? So that's the idea of Powerup.
And Kirk, what kind of tools can you connect together in a Powerup?
Yep. So there's a number of different ones. Obviously, one of the ones that we've started focusing on around, and you see all the time within the Frontiers Conference as well, is around incident management practices. Every company, every business unit, irregardless, has to deal with incidents. One of the aspects is, well, how do you manage incidents in an orchestrated fashion? So we've spent some time over the past year developing an incident management bot, which is chat ops, through the chat ops-based interface, in-app, within Slack, where the teams are working. And it's been highly successful, but the goal is really to align multiple applications together, orchestrate it, deliver in-app function and feature where the engineers and where the support engineers are.
Great. And what kind of teams have been collaborating together in this incident management tool?
Sure. So we have a number of internal applications that obviously are part of this, and we also have a number of external parties. What we see happening within the industry is there's more focus on cloud, more focus on SaaS, and also a higher increase in the number of applications and integrations themselves. So we're trying to tie a number of these together to deliver bigger, better value. Some of these partners, I think, are obviously participants here within Frontiers as well.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's been a lot of good impact that's been happening, right? What kind of impact have you been seeing from just using an incident management custom app where you connect all these tools together?
Sure. So what we see within IBM is we see value. We're trying to focus on the efficient processes. How do we deliver this faster? Within incident management, you think about things around how quickly can I contact the support engineer that's on staff? How quickly can I communicate to the stakeholders that are available? How quickly can I resolve support issues on behalf of the client customer to impact our mean time to resolution? I think we've seen a significant impact to that, and also the availability and visibility of the information. Having that posted within Slack itself through an incident manager bot like this is fantastic.
And it's not just connecting apps that you can do with the custom app, right? Because it's also very complex to learn how to use this. And you built this screenshot up here that's a guide as to how to use incident management. Can you talk to us about that?
Sure. So one of the focuses that we also have within IBM is tools that we select, whether it's an application or a piece of infrastructure, have to be easy to use. We can't pick up a manual in order to understand how to use these tools anymore. So we also provide quick how-to tutorials on how to get in, how to get involved, how to initiate the incident manager bot itself, along with many other applications. The focus is around in-app experience, in-app education, in-app getting started material so that teams, engineers can get up and moving as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and I remember you said this great quote to me a couple of weeks ago that technology is actually not the barrier. It's changing the culture to get people to adopt. So can you tell us a little bit more about how you've gotten your teams to adopt Incident Manager?
Yep, that's right. So one of the biggest challenges that we have is not necessarily providing technology to a company the size of IBM, but really changing the culture. So a large majority of the tools that we select are focused on not only the tools themselves, best-in-class tools, but partnered with best-in-class practices. So a lot of the focus is around trying to tie those together to deliver bigger value on behalf of the employee base. And there's a number of ways that we do that. We publish a lot of this material through Slack Guild channels for teams that are interwoven into a certain business class or a certain job role or responsibility. We host webinars. We provide pamphlets. We host face-to-face work sessions to help enable teams to get up and moving as quick as possible.
That's great. And you talked to me about a couple of the results, like reduced mean time to resolution. Any other kind of results that you saw from using incident management?
I think we also see an impact to user satisfaction. Our engineers want to be able to deliver something and do the best work of their life. So we saw Stuart talk a little bit about that. That's one of the models of Slack. We want employees to do the best work of their lives, and we see that along the way with some of these tools and technologies. It's a better, more efficient way to manage IT within the world itself, and it gets you out of traditional legacy-based infrastructure models that perhaps need momentum and a little bit of push to move.
Yeah, that's perfect. So what's next for Incident Manager?
So IBM, along with many other companies, are focused really around AI, machine learning. How do we drive and infuse AI into a lot of what we do, whether it's through an application, whether it's through chat-based operations? We want to be able to use cognitive abilities to identify where to approach. So a lot of IBM's focus in the future is around how do we infuse AI, machine learning, IBM Watson capabilities to help better the IT company and the IT world in general.
That's perfect. And for all the admins and IT decision makers and admins in this audience, do you have any words of advice on how to get started with building custom apps?
I think find a team within your organization that is empowered and has the technical abilities and the business knowledge to identify a problem. Focus on the business problem first and see if you can find a way to drive efficiency, showcase that value, identify it, and then also communicate that out. If your peers see a peer doing something that's an efficient process and a better way to work, then they'll tend to follow suit if it can deliver business results. So start small and showcase those results and make sure they don't go unnoticed.
Perfect. Well, great. Thank you so much for sharing your story. It's so great to hear about how IBM has managed as well as built some of these apps. So we really appreciate your time.
It's great to be here. Thank you all. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you, Kirk. All right. All right, we've got one more story for you today. And for that, I'd like to invite up Mike Solomon from Hearst Magazines. Mike, so good to see you.
Great to see you.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So Hearst Magazines, it's another huge company, and here are just some of the couple of magazine titles that you own. Is that right?
Yeah. So that's a lot of logos, a lot of cool brands.
How many brands do you have?
30 US and over 300 international.
Okay, great. And how much content do all these brands produce on a daily basis?
So we don't just do printed magazines. We produce over 2,500 pieces of content a day. So that's web articles, that's social content, that's Snapchat Discover content for Cosmo, and I think PopMech is also publishing to Snapchat Discover. So a lot of content. It generates a lot of data.
Great. Yeah, data, that's important. So, Mike, I've had the privilege of getting to know you over the past couple of weeks, and I'm excited for you to share your story about how Hearst accesses and uses data. But first, your title is a product strategy director. Can you tell us what that means and what your role is at Hearst?
Sure. So that's kind of a fancy word for just building fun things and seeing what works and seeing what doesn't work, and then deciding what to build at scale.
Yeah. Can you give us some examples of a couple of things that you've built? Like, I think polls you've talked about.
Yeah. A lot of the products that I help build are about understanding how our audience is consuming all this data that we're creating every day. And it's not about just understanding how the audience is consuming it, but it's about surfacing that data to the right people at the right time. And that is kind of where Slack comes in, so you can see where we're going with this.
Absolutely. Before we get into that, can you just give us some context of how Hearst Magazines uses Slack?
Yeah, so we're basically org-wide in Slack. So we've got the editorial folks who are writing content, digital content and print content. We've got executives, growth, product like me, so the sales and marketing folks. Basically everybody, everyone that's creating content and marketing and selling it is in Slack.
Perfect. And so, let me go to the next slide. You talk a lot about data and needs. So can you talk to us a little bit more about what kind of needs all of these teams need to go through to work together with each other?
Yeah, so we really wanted to democratize data within the organization. Some of us, like the digital folks, are very data savvy, and other folks, like the people that write the print magazine every month, they're less digital savvy, and they were a little adverse to having data surfaced and being more data-driven in the content that they're creating.
Great. So you built this custom app called Hans. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that does and what it is?
Right. So there's the kind of cute, weird little avatar that we gave him. And what it is it's a bot that takes all that audience consumption data around all the content we're creating, and it brings it into Slack, where editorial decisions are actually happening. So this helps to make sure that everyone at Hearst, from the editorial staff to the people selling and marketing the content, all the way up to the executives, they're all armed with the same data, and they're all empowered to share that data.
And you mentioned everyone uses it, right? So who's included in that?
Right. So the president of the company, Troy Young, he literally checks it from his bed every morning just to get a sense of what content is overperforming. And even like junior level folks and interns, they all have access to the data. They use it over 1,000 times a day.
Wow, that's incredible. So tell me how all of this gets started then. Did you just wake up one morning and decide, hey, I'm going to go build this Hans bot?
So it started, so I mentioned Troy. Troy was the president of just the digital group, so the folks making the web content and the social content. He was promoted to being in charge of all magazine brands. And what he really wanted to do was make the print folks much better at being data-driven and content creation. So over the years, we'd built up a lot of muscle around being data-driven in terms of creating content for the .coms and for the social channels. But he really wanted to basically get them using Slack and get them addicted to having data surfaced in Slack. And that was kind of how it all got started.
Great. And accessing data. So you probably built this because it's really hard to access data. Can you tell me about some of the pain points that you had run into?
Yeah, so data's been notoriously difficult to get at. If you're one of those print creators, like I mentioned, you're basically getting focus group reports once a month, and these focus groups literally cost $100,000 to get a little sliver of data. And then after you spend all that money, it's also hard to know how to take action on that data. So that's kind of some of the pain points on the print side of the business. On the digital side, these are the digital savvy folks, so they're already awash in data. They're getting actually almost too much data, and it's hard to know what's important with all that data. And then how do you know how to divide your time dashboard diving versus actually creating content for the web?
That's right. So I would have thought, just pull up Google Analytics and make a data dashboard. That's the answer. But you also told me this quote a couple weeks ago. Dashboards are where data goes to die.
I love
and
this
that
quote.
stuck with me. So can you talk us through what you meant by this?
Yeah, so it's a little hyperbolic, but it's kind of a nice way to think about servicing the right data to the right people at the right time. Often with a dashboard, it just doesn't quite get there. So what servicing data in Slack lets us do is it really helps solve that last mile problem.
Great. So then I'm sure you had to talk to a bunch of people to try to figure out how to build the right tools for them. So how did you go about approaching this?
So we did a lot of interviews with folks throughout the organization, and we just kind of asked them this simple question that kind of made them think differently about consuming data. The best way to consume data is to start with a question. So we did a lot of user interviews, and we started to build and iterate on this bot with this kind of guiding principle. And I have some demos that I'd like to show.
Absolutely. Take it away.
Thanks. So this is Alyssa Bailey, and she's an editor for L.com. She writes about celebrities and the latest news. So she starts her morning by asking Hans what's trending across the web. Hans looks through the RSS feeds of hundreds of websites and applies a clustering algorithm to identify trending topics and the headlines associated with them. This was the news about 2 weeks ago when we made these slides. So she sees that CBS News and People are talking about Lori Loughlin in jail. It also found some coverage by Hearst brands, L.com and Cosmopolitan.com. So those are Hearst brands, there's Hearst coverage there. She scrolls down a little further and she sees that Yahoo and BuzzFeed are writing news about the new Lion King trailer, and there's white space. Nobody at Hearst has written about it yet. So she thinks maybe she'll write about the new Lion King trailer for L.com. But before she starts to write her article, she wants to get a sense of, will this perform for the L audience? So she wonders if the L audience is into Disney movies, so she asks Hans to search for Disney movies over L across the past 2 years. And Hans returns with some actual L stories that have been written. This is using Google Analytics data. So she's looking at the page views and the average time spent, and she sees that there's pretty good engagement here, so she decides to go ahead and write the article. Flash forward to the next morning. This is in the L editorial channel. It's an open channel. And notice she's talking to Hans, but she's using a slash command. She's not talking directly to the bot. So she's asking Hans, what are the best performing stories on L yesterday? And you can see the story she wrote about The Lion King is at the top of the pack. And this is a good place to pause, because this is a great place to realize the value of this data being publicly available in this channel. This really helps democratize the data and bring the right data to the right people at the right time. And this is literally how the L editors start their morning. And then below, they'll have a conversation about what the results mean and how they're going to plan their editorial schedule for the day and for the week. So, thank you. So we also do a lot of work with commerce. A big part of any magazine brand is recommending the right products to the right people. So, for example, Esquire recommends the coolest jackets to wear, or Mary Claire recommends skincare products that actually work. So here, Emily Silverman, she's in charge of boosting commerce revenue from the content that we write about. So she asks Hans for the top products on Esquire. So what Hans returns are a crew neck shirt. So this is a t-shirt product from an article about the best t-shirts to wear. And then below that, there's a jacket about the best jackets to wear when you're traveling. So again, this is really valuable data because, again, it's public, it's in this channel, and anyone who writes about user-centered content and writes service content, this data is really, really valuable for them. And again, they have conversations below about what content to write about. One way we magnify the value of this product data is by rolling it to the URL level. So she can ask about the top commerce URLs. So these are URLs with multiple products. And you can see this top performing URL is about Mother's Day gifts. And because it has 24 products in it, it's performing really, really well. So Emily wonders, this is performing well for this Delish brand, but wouldn't it also perform well for the Cosmopolitan audience or the Elle audience? They would also enjoy reading this article. So one of the cool things about Hearst is we share data, like you're seeing in public channels, but we also share content. So we make it easy for Emily to actually duplicate that article and potentially triple the revenue and triple the reach. So this is something that we started doing with Hans, or since Hans, and we've seen a 2.8x increase in revenue from cloned articles. So one last demo that I'll quickly power through because it looks like we're short on time. This is Troy, he's the boss, and this is literally what he does from his bed at 6 a.m. It's true because I look at the logs. He asks for the best of, and the best of is a report that just summarizes all the content that's overperforming. So the top story yesterday across all of our brands, the top news story, sometimes old stories are overperforming. This makes sure that you can also see the top news story, the most engaging story. So we're not just chasing page views and clicks, but we're also trying to boost engagement with time that people are spending with our content. It also shows the commerce story and the top product. You can see this is the same content that Emily was looking at. Again, making sure the whole organization is armed with the same data. The top video and the top Instagram posts are always fun. The brands do really, really well on Instagram. And again, this is just make sure that everyone in the organization is armed with the same data so we can make decisions smarter and faster together.
Yeah, we would have loved to do a live demo, but we might be showing Cardi B's most recent engagement pictures or something, so we didn't want to do that. But really quickly, Troy asked you to do this just 6 months ago. How did you accomplish all of this and get everyone at the company to use it?
Right. So we really just wanted to impress him, frankly, which is a good tip for anyone making bots. It's surprisingly easy to build your own bots. You find a developer, and you find a data person, in which case I found Zach Packer, who has worked with us a while and knows where all of our data silos are and could help us get out the data. And it was surprisingly easy, much easier than I thought.
That's great. All right. Well, with that, thank you so much. This was a fantastic example of how you can build a custom bot.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks.
All right. So, well, with that, I'd like to just quickly wrap it up. And we hope that some of these examples have given you some inspiration to show how connecting all of your tools or building new tools and putting them into Slack can really help you find these types of efficiency gains. So with external apps, workflow apps, and custom apps, you hopefully have several degrees of freedom in how you choose to implement these. Thank you so much for coming. And if you'd like to learn more about apps, the platform station out in the expo hall has a lot more information, and feel free to grab one of us to chat more. Thank you for coming.